Hello, everybody. Peter Maravellis here, welcoming you to another installment of City Lights Live, the virtual component of the City Lights events calendar. As always, we are beaming to you from the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone people, also known as the San Francisco Bay Area. I'd like to take this moment to the outset to acknowledge and offer our respect to those who come before us as stewards of the land. So tonight, City Lights and the University of Kentucky Press celebrate the publication of the poetry collection titled Black Mestiza. It is by Pushcart Prize winning poet Yael Valencia Aldana and is part of the University Press of Kentucky New Poetry and Prose series. Yael Valencia Aldana is an Afro-Latinx poet and writer and the author of the book Aliens. She is a descendant on her mother's and grandmother's side of the indigenous people of the modern day Colombia. As a Pushcart Prize winner, her work has appeared in Torch Literary Arts, Chapter House Journal, Slag Glass City, amongst many other outlets. She is managing editor of Purple Ink Press and teaches creative writing in Southern Florida, where she makes her home with her son and her many lovely pets. One may find her online at yaelaldana.com. She'll be joined tonight by Jennifer Maritza McCauley, who is a writer, poet, and educator. She's the author of the acclaimed cross-genre collection, Scar On, Scar Off, the short story collection, When Trying to Return Home, and the poetry collection, Kinds of Grace. Her work has appeared in the Boston Review, Passages North, Puerto del Sol, the Afro-Hispanic Review, amongst many other outlets. She is presently an assistant professor at the University of Missouri, Kansas City's Creative Writing Program. So join us now in offering a warm welcome to Yael Valencia Aldana and Jennifer Maritza McCauley. A pleasure to have you both with us, and it's such a great honor. Welcome to City Lights.
Thank you so much.
So yes, it's so wonderful to be here with you, Yael.
I know, I'm so excited. I can't wait to see what questions you come up with.
Yes. Okay, so I'm so excited. So Yael and I have known each other for a little, it's been a year? Are we coming up a year anniversary?
We'll just say a year.
Yeah, it's been a year. But a lot of crazy coincidences kind of led to us coming together too. So I think that was really special. This is an absolutely phenomenal book. So when I got the ARC for this, I was the ARC for this. I was just completely blown away. I read the first poem. I was like, okay, I'll read this and I'll get to it in a little bit. And you have stuff to do. And then I read the first poem and I was like blown away. It was just amazing. And I was like, okay, I have to stop everything. So I just went the entire thing in one sitting. It was phenomenal. I keep going through it. So I have questions for you. But I would love to hear if you have anything you'd love to read for us for a little bit, and then we can kind of chat afterward.
Yeah, that sounds great. So I'm going to start with the poem that won a Pushcart, Black Person Head Bob. At my last reading, I didn't read it. People were like, why didn't you read that poem? So I'm going to start with it. Black Person Head Bob. I still count. How many of us are in here? 5, 6, 2, including me? Why are we going to fight somebody? Our backs against their gilded walls? Have we made progress? We made it yet? If we stare too long, sometimes we head bob. I see you, you see me. I see you, a woman on a Philadelphia street. I stare for half a second too long. You stare for half a second too long. Your houndstooth jacket, just so. Your gray hair, just so. Like my mother would have done. You see me. We do not speak. We pass a silent, go on, girl, as we cross. She is cleaning the university bathroom in her blue uniform. She sees me. I see her. We head bob. We do not speak. We pass a silent, go on, girl, as we cross. I asked my colleague, 24 to my 44, do y'all still count how many Black people are in the room? Do y'all still hold each other's gaze half second too long? I see you, you see me. I got you. You got me. Or is that old woman stuff? Old Black woman stuff I learned from my mother. I saw you, he says. I counted you, he says. I got you. You got me. For our ancestors below the sea, from our ancestors across the sea. I see you. You see me. So next, I'm going to read Angela Davis Was in My Car in honor of Black History Month. And it is Audre Lorde and Toni Morrison's birthday today. So going to be channeling some of that incredible greatness and read this poem about the great Angela Davis, who is still very much alive. Angela Davis was in my car. I bought new brown leopard pattern seat covers for my dog-chewed interior to drive her from the college lecture hall to her hotel. She is redwood tree tall. She walks like a battleship cutting through ice. Her voice fills the car. Her sentences trail off at the end and keeps on trailing. Have you heard Angela Davis speak? Her vowels swoop down, then curve up and dissipate like an Italian, but not like an Italian, like she's from the country of Angela Davis. I took her to the wrong hotel, then the right hotel. She was supposed to die in prison, but she didn't. She lived. She lived and rose, lived and took us with her in her rising, kept living, kept on rising, keep on rising, kept on taking us, kept on keeping on. Our hands looped around her scarf, threaded through her pockets, our dreams hanging on to her jeans. I tell her about my classes. I tell her I write about forgotten women, my grandmother, my grandmothers, my mother. Her voice undulates, rolls, ripples, weaves through my mind. Get on it, girl, she says. She left 3 soft steel gray hairs on my headrest. If I had the right incantation, I could make my own Angela Davis. And this one is called We Are Very Witchy. Nos estamos haciendo muy brujas. We are becoming very witchy, Sandra Cisneros. We make glittering altars in blue and white mosaics with plaster skulls and black and white photographs. We burn candles. We clutch our talismans, the gold embossed cross around your conquistador neck, the hammered silver cross around your English neck, pictures of stark dour grandmothers, money from absent dead grandfathers, ancestors come to the fore. My mother and I call you, all of you, from your island beneath my sea. This is how we burn next to stiff white Anglican prayer books, next to Methodist prayer guides with jaunty yellow flowers, next to gold-edged Roman Catholic Bibles. Ave Maria, it's still Colalique, it's still Oshun, it's still Yage Medicina, it's still Obia, it's still Benin Voudon, clasped in crisp white filaments and wrapped in fire. So I'm going to just read 2 more. And these are from a suite of poems called the Rodrigo Suite that are some of my favorite. For you. There was a time in the Pantheon, the time before quasars, the time before penumbras were invented, the time before souls, when we were twins clung together, brothers, sisters, who knows, but one skin, one gossamer bubble of thread, dark eye to dark eye. The residue adheres, sticky filaments on the wing. It arrows, it winnows, stretches, thin as mylar. It is the most tapered kind of affection. And then lastly, Amado de mi alma, which means beloved of my soul. Give me this, Ada Limon. If there was a pill, maybe red, liquid, thin, rubbered membrane, or maybe orange, oval, and smooth, or maybe white and chalky, that would sever the nexus between us, I would throw it down my moist, peached maw. He, too, would pinch it between his potato farmer fingers, muscle it dry across his tongue, sideways down his throat, greedily take it to be rid of me. We are all eye-rolling, all lip-curling, sneering resistance to any, to all peace. We cannot stand each other, but we love each other. In this quiet, his dry, warm skin becomes mine. When in proximity, his chest opens, a galaxy. My universe spins into his, all hot plasma. We are luminous gas giants, winking on and off, moving past, moving into one darkness, lighted cold fusion. He purses his lips as if to say, no, we cannot escape this gravity. I point my chin as if to say, yes, we have lured each other here. He lifts his dark, dark eyes to mine as if to say, no, we cannot escape this singularity. Thank you.
Oh, I could just listen to you read for the whole hour. This is so lovely. Incredibly powerful poems. They just hit you in the heart. So some of the questions I have are kind of about this book, but also about the sort of creation of the book. So one of the poems that I really love, it's called in Self-Portrait in Your Slices.
Yes.
And you talk about the sort of reflexivity of identity and the subjectivity of all of it. And that's something that we often get asked a lot about. And I thought that was really, I thought you dealt with it with such nuance. The speaker is sometimes called too dark, other times she's too light. But the nuance was what really got to me. And you projected a sense of complexity when it comes to these subjects. And I was wondering how you tackle that in any of your poems, that sense of nuance and complexity when it comes to these sort of more complicated topics.
Well, I think that, my experience sort of gives that to me and I'm going to flip this and reverse this on you. And I'd love for you to bring your take in it on as well. I think as Black women and Black people, we're consumed in a certain type of way, and our color is very on topic. Even within our own families, if I was out running around when I was little outside, my mother would yell at me not to be in the sun too long because I was getting too dark. People would say, other Black people would say to me, oh, you're a brown skinned girl, your life is easy, you know. So all of these little aggressions, I'll call them, they came out in this book because, you just can't cruise along and be yourself. People see you, they're like, oh, where are you from? Is that your real hair? Like, are you Latin? If I say I'm from Brooklyn, they're like, no, where are you really from? So it all came together to me in this poem. And I wanted to share that aspect of my life, but not be too heavy-handed with it, and weave it throughout the collection as it is a part of my life, because if I go to the supermarket right now, someone might walk up to me and want to know where I'm from. but they probably won't if my son is standing there next to me, because somehow he provides some kind of protection. And I remember just a few times people would say strange things to me, like when I was in middle school and I went for band, someone said, the band director says, oh, I think you'd be good at flute because your lips are thin. So I went home and I was trying to measure my lips, and I'm like, are they thin though? Is it? So I'm trying to figure out what other people are seeing when they're looking at me. And I've taken the paper bag because um there used to be a paper bag test, and if you were darker than a paper bag, you can enter some clubs. And I'm like, where am I in terms of the paper bag? But it doesn't matter when you're living your life, but people keep reminding you about the skin that you're living in, and keep probing and bringing it to the surface, even when you don't feel like dealing with it at the moment. So that's
Yeah.
what I was trying to do throughout the collection. And the layeredness and the subtlety comes from my experience. Sometimes people are very subtle. You don't even understand where they're going, and you like sort of answer their question and you're like moving on. They're like, no, no, no. And they
Yeah.
bring you around. I want to know this about you. Why do you need to know this about me? You don't. So I wanted that throughout. So I sort of sprinkled. Um, and I'd love to hear a little bit of your perspective on this as well.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely that's a poem that I really connected to because, like I've told you this before to privately, but to everyone, same thing. When I read this book, I was like, I thought this was written for me because I'm just like, it just felt so personal and it felt so intimate. But even that experience of kind of being too dark for some folks, too light for some folks, too this for some folks, that's something I've definitely experienced as an Afro-Latino woman myself. Um, so I definitely relate to those experiences, and it's different in Puerto Rico. I'm treated differently in Puerto Rico than I am treated in the States. I'm even treated differently in Florida and Miami, where we both did our MFA, than I am in Kansas City versus Pittsburgh versus all those different places. So I think
Hmm.
that I used to joke with my husband that I had a bod like sort of like self dysmorphia because I'm just like I don't know like what am I don't even know because everyone's telling me different things.
Right,
So
exactly.
I'm just gonna have to create like I'm just gonna have to keep that self within myself. So that's my answer to that. But yeah. But yeah, so and I love what you've been saying so far too. That really kind of is illuminating to me. Um, in that poem, Why Don't You Write About Joy? You write about both pain and joy in this book absolutely brilliantly. Um, so the speaker challenges those who try to reduce joy to quick remedies and solutions in this poem. And, since this was one of the poems, again, one of these poems that was like a gut punch to me because I've experienced this before. Because for my first book, it dealt with a lot of darker topics. And then people are like, write about happy things. And it's like, well, duh. I mean, sometimes it's not always, wonderful all the time. So I really appreciated that poem and I related to it a lot. And I was wondering if you could tell me the story behind that poem or
Oh boy. This is when I was a baby poet, and I would just ravishly consume all readings. And there was a poet I really admired, and she had an online talk, and I'm really excited for it. And she said during her interview, she says, you know what, I don't understand why people don't write more about joy. Like, if there's such wonderful things in the world, why are people always writing about suffering and all these poems that bring you down? You know, um, I'm like, girl, that's because this is our life. And what came to me in that moment is the joy that um, marginalized people find, in their lives. We go out to all kinds of nonsense. Like, we don't know what we're going to encounter from who they feel the right to walk up to us and say whatever because we're brown, and there's some kind of inherent license, like, oh, this is a brown person, so I can walk up to them and tell them something, right? So we don't know what is going to happen, when my son goes out. I try to send my protection out with him. But there's so much joy in our existence and in community. And Black Person Head Bob is about the community that we have automatically. And there's another poem in the collection that talks about, a young man called to me and he said sister in a certain way. And I knew this young Black man, he needs me. He's calling to me as a sister, as his sister, as his Black sister. So I turned around and I knew he needed help. And I went to him to see what I could do for him. And I thought, what an amazing concept that, we could just dump me on some random street and I can call to another Black person. I can say, brother, sister, and they're going to recognize that tone and they're going to turn around and come and see what I need. So although there's a lot of difficulty and, racism we deal with on a daily basis, there's this incredible community, incredible joy, incredible creativity, um, that the Black and Latinx community have. And so I was reacting to what she said in a positive, way. I said, well, this is what we do because, my grandmother suffered, her child was taken, when my mother was in trouble, they, instead of just taking, because she had ectopic pregnancy, instead of just, taking one fallopian tube, they took the whole womb. It's just things that we've gone through. So we write about that because that's our experience, but it doesn't mean that we're not joyful. And one of my favorite lines from that poem is, just because you can't hear us doesn't mean we're not singing, so you're choosing to look at, we're talking about suffering, but on the other hand, we're also singing and finding joy in all kinds of places.
Yes. That's incredible. What an incredible answer too. And I think that goes back to something you were saying too about that the circumstances themselves will give you the nuance sometimes. And I think that you're sort of capturing that with just such brilliance and such, complexity that, I love it. So, Black Mestiza, the poem, I have reread this so many times and I'm obsessed with this poem because, and it comes from just that first line too. I heard a rumor that I didn't exist. And I was like, damn.
Yeah,
I was
this
like,
is a true story.
that just kind of, that hit me in the gut. But yeah, so, I mean, I guess can you tell us the story behind that poem that speaks to
Okay. The story behind this poem also loops back around to the story, the title of the book. So the title of the book used to be something like Their Island Under My Sea. Peter had mentioned Isabella Allende before, and she has a book titled El Bajo. Now I'm not gonna remember it, but The Island Under the Sea, something like that. And I was like obsessed with that title. I was like, it has to be that title. And I had the manuscript. I was going to my mentor to get her feedback on it. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I couldn't go back to sleep. And I was just so frustrated. I'm like, listen, I need to drive almost 2 hours tomorrow. I need to go to sleep. Ancestors, angels, whoever's keeping me up, just give me the message so I can go to sleep because I need to sleep. And I'm there tossing and turning, and I just get, this impression. The name of the book's not right. I'm like, okay, great. What should it be? Can we wrap this up so I can go to sleep? And it's even come out of nowhere, Black Mestiza, because of this conversation I had with a previous student in my class. And my grandmother is Colombian. And, I was really warmly welcomed into the Colombian diaspora, the community, I'm like, oh, no, I'm not Colombian. My grandmother, they're like, no, girl, you're Colombian. Come with us. You're one of us type of thing. And one of my professors when I was at school, she was like, oh, you're a mestiza. This is what a mestiza is. And it's a mixed race person. And to me, she looked very white. She had really, really pale skin, and she had very, very dark hair. She was like your classic Spanish beauty, And she says, oh, you're a mestiza like me. And I'm like, girl, we're in America now. I'm not like you, but I thought that was like so incredible. And I was talking about this in one of my classes, and a young woman of Colombian ancestry, but she's born here. She says, no, you're not a mestiza because mestizas are not Black. And I'm like, girl, really? Um, so I found that really shocking because someone who was born in Colombia is telling me one thing, but someone who is from Colombian ancestry in the US is telling me something else. And to me, it was very obvious that she was trying to exclude me. She's like, you don't belong here,
Yeah.
and I'm telling you. So that first line, I heard a rumor I didn't exist, comes directly from that conversation with her because she's telling me that my identity as a mestiza doesn't exist. You do not exist in my world as a mestiza because you are Black. Straight up, the audacity of like a 20-year-old. So when I was tossing and turning, I was also struggling with the ostracization from, I don't know, I guess I'll call them lighter skinned Latinas, or Latinas that identify as white. I don't know how to really define them. I was in Miami, I was welcomed into the Latinx community. And then I started talking about being Black, a lot. And there was lots of poems about being Black. And there was this resistance, because I had two people I really admired in the poetry community who offered to read my book. And they reacted very badly to these Black women poems. And they were like, these are repetitive. Why you keep talking about this? And I couldn't figure it out for a minute until, I was like, I remembered that conversation with her and where she's really actively pushing back against my Blackness. And I thought, oh my gosh, of course, there's a lot of racism in the Latinx community as well. And to be Afro-Latin is different, than just Latin, right? So that's where that came from. And I said, okay, well, if I'm going to rename the book Black Mestiza, I need to have some poems in there explaining what the connection is. And actually, so I added these poems, Black Mestiza and Las Mestizas. And I also added, I used my friend Edgar, who is Venezuelan. And he is at the top of anybody's list, okay? He is very handsome, he is tall, he is very in shape. And he always, we clicked on like a friendship level, intellectual level. We talk about space a lot, random things. But he would always say to me, he's like, oh, you're so beautiful, you're so beautiful. And I would say, Edgar, are you okay? Because you're like a 10, maybe a 15 out of 10. And I'm just a regular person. And then I tried to get into this conversation with him about, the stratification of the Latin community, like who is at the top. There's colorism, in the Latin community as well. And he would be like, girl, what are you talking about? You're just beautiful. What do you want from me? So I put the poems in here about him to introduce that subject and that conversation that we had to deal with the colorism through him. And so there's a suite in there called the Edgar Suite. And those 5 poems all came in to support the name Black Mestiza. And the thing is that when people see it, the people that know, like if that girl saw it in the bookstore, she'd be like, there's no, what is she talking about, Black Mestizas? There are none, right? So it would trigger her. And the ones I'm trying to reach are going to get it too. So it does two things at one time.
Mm, yeah. And that is just, oh, that's what I love so much about this book. Like I said, like just there's nothing polemical about this. It's just real life. It's complicated. It's pro-Black. It's a glorious book. It just absolutely is. Um,
Thank you.
yeah. And so we talked a little bit about the Edgar suite. Um, there's so many poems that I love here that I just want to talk about all of them. So actually one of the things that is a kind of a major theme in this collection is ancestry and your relationship to the ancestors, and whether it be the matrilineal line or you know, whether it be our literary heroes like Zora Neale Hurston. So I was wondering how ancestry and ancestors have factored into this book for you. Was it something conscious, or it just came to you?
Well, I think the way my mother raised me, that we always had ancestors in mind. And I didn't understand at the time that's what she was doing. And this is a tradition that Caribbean women do. Basically, the they pass the lives of the female ancestors down the female line. And I found out about this in graduate school. But when I was growing up, my great grandmother, her name was Titi, and Titi had been dead 20 years by the time I came along. But you wouldn't know that because my mother was always talking about her. Like she
Mm.
was right there. And we had this one picture where she's a formal picture. She's dressed up. She's sitting in her backyard, with her little purse. And when I grew up, I was like, it was strange to me to think about that she was dead because my mother talked about her so much that she was alive for me.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh.
and when I found out about this Colombian grandmother, and apparently I look Colombian because throughout my life, Colombians would come up to me and say, "Are you Colombian? Are you Colombian?" I was like, "No, no, no, no." But they recognize this. And when I found out about her, I honestly, my whole life changed because I wanted to write about her. And where did she come from? And she came from a really tiny town in Colombia called Chinacota, which is in the interior, almost in Venezuela. And she came to the English speaking Caribbean, which of course, her name was Carmen Sofia Aldana Valencia. So of course they chopped off that Valencia. And then she just became Carmen Aldana. And I wanted to know what brought her from Colombia to Trinidad. And when I spoke to the rest of the family, they were like, she came, who knows, whatever. But I was just so intrigued by it. So when I'm talking about ancestors, I'm mainly calling on her,
Mm.
like, because I feel like her story is so important. And she was one Aldana, came from Colombia, and apparently Aldana is like Smith in Colombia, like there's 1,000 million Aldanas. And now there's like about 50 Aldanas in Trinidad where she lives. So she brought all of these Aldanas,
Yeah.
her one self. And the whole thing, it was just very intriguing to me. So whenever I write, I always have her in mind. And whatever platform I gain and whatever I'm doing, I'm always carrying her because I want to write more about her story. And I'm finally working on it. You know, putting it together as as a book. So it's not only like calling on her, but through the wonder of DNA to find out that the maternal line is solid indigenous.
Mm.
There is a DNA packet that's passed unchanged from mother to daughter and down the line. And mine is indigenous. They were like indigenous from Colombia, related to the Arsario tribe who live in the Santa Marta Mountains. They're xenophobic. They don't come out, you know. So that means that that DNA packet that went with my grandmother was preserved because when the Spanish came to Colombia, some of the native went into the mountains, and the mountains were very, very difficult. So the Spanish could never get up in there to get them. And they stayed there. They're there now. So there was that separation where her people, didn't go into Santa Marta, obviously, because she became a mestiza. And so that's very important to me. I think of them, in the mountains, and I think of her. So I'm trying to call everybody, like, I need all the support I can get, people here. But primarily it's for her, Carmen, and she's always on my mind. And to keep her with me, and to bring her.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, I got chills listening to you talk. I just felt like her spirit. I don't know. There's a spirit here. But yeah, I remember so the end of August Wilson's piano lesson, he starts playing boy. I don't know, I have a story. I'll let it go. I feel like I'm just gonna blab. Okay. That was fantastic. So also another poem I really like is, how much time do we have? Do we have enough time? I think so.
We have time.
Take your
Okay.
time.
Yeah, so another poem that I absolutely loved was Small, Dark, and Moving.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was a poem that I actually want to just like frame, maybe because I just relate to it. But I think that it's absolutely fabulous, and I was wondering if you could tell us the story about behind that Small, Dark, and Moving as well.
Yeah. Small, dark, and moving. You know what? It's pretty short, so I'll read it so people know what's going on. Um, Open, open. I am perverse. I am small, dark, and moving. I move in waves. I am moving, rippling, hump, my back hump, bend my back bend. I am fish, moving under power, malachite scales flashing. Now I transform. I am flower soft, translucent petals floating on dark indigo water. I rise into air. I want nothing more, nothing. Inked iridescent feathers stir, the shadowed avian leaps from its branch into openness, pushing up against nothing, pushing up into air. I just read it because it's sort of an enigmatic poem, and I wrote that a good 30 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, I sort of my thirst for writing exploded after I read Cat's Eye, which is a novel by Margaret Atwood, and Beloved by Toni Morrison. And Atwood wrote a lot of poetry, and I started to write poetry. I just wrote, And this individual poem, that I read is pretty much unchanged from how I wrote it 30 years ago. And it's doing two things. It's talking about, transforming, but it's also talking about being Black. I am small, dark, and moving. So I'm too fast. I'm changing. You can't get me with your bad cloth. Like I'm going here, I'm going there, and I'm, going all over. Um, and yeah, I'm fascinated by animals and how they move, especially fish and birds. So, I was equating it to being, a person of color, and how when you go in the store, you just act in a certain way, and you're like, my purchases are far away from my bag. Look, and I'm paying for them, type of thing. Um, the way you transform yourself in different spaces. So this like, I'm small and I'm dark, but I'm moving. So it's very literal, but it's also figurative. Using animals is like a metaphor for transformation in different aspects.
Yeah. Oh, that's phenomenal. Thank you. Oh, so
And
next.
oh wait, hang on. So there's three versions of that poem. And the
Yeah.
way that happened is because I wrote it a long time ago. So when I saw it, I knew, and I'm poetic now. I'd study things. So I took three different versions of this poem along with the original to my mentor, one of my mentors, and I said, what do you think? You know, I thought she's gonna be like, oh, this is trash, forget it. And she's like, no, I like all three, keep all three. So there's three different, slightly different versions in the book, and that's what.
Yeah. Yeah, and some of the language is kind of self-referential in some of the poems as well. So they kind of, yeah, it's fantastic. So I think Nancy has a question for us. She says, I study Latin American poets and found that the freedom palenques where both indigenous and Black people could escape the colonists by forming communities inland jungle lands produced some great poetry. That didn't happen so much up north. Could you speak to that, please? So I was wondering, so we can, we can take her question and we can just keep chatting.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna reread it. I think we just do that naturally. Like even the way like we form a community, you and I, as Latinx poets, and then when we're going to AWP next month, there's like a clump of us female Afro-Latina poets like gathering together.
Yeah.
It's just really natural, and I think, the poem Black Person Head Bob speaks to that, because like when we see each other, we're like, I see you, I got you, so it's just something very natural that we do. And I would say we do it for the love of each other, but I think it's also to harden ourselves against, you know, societal's microaggressions. Because I don't know about you, but I always start laughing about stupid things that happen, with my fellow Latinx people, just down here in Florida, like when we meet someone, we're like, oh my gosh, like, did this happen to you? Yes, it happened to me. And then we laugh about it. And it gives us strength, you know, to go on. And it's to me, it's like if I'm around other Black people, other Afro Latinx people, that community's there right away. It's like it's like a magnet. It just goes together, especially if we are dealing with writing, if we have things in common. Even if we don't have things, we find things in common, so we just cling together to make ourselves stronger, you know, um, as we go along. And it's been a little tough for me. I've lived in South Florida, I don't know, 20 years or something like that. And I left my um my New York community. And it's just tough. You go out and just on the subway and you see people that are like you and you can head bob them. And, there's one poem in there that I talk about like running from the subway. And then a guy just puts his work boot in, the doors to stop the doors so you can come in. That's also a form of community, where you just know someone's got you in a certain way. And down here it's sort of suburban and spread out and trying to be like homogenous American, and there's not that. I can't, if I go out the door, like if I go to the supermarket, I have a certain tenseness to me because there's not a lot of people from my community here, and I don't know who's going to say what to me, and I might not be in the mood to hear what they're saying. So I think it's something that we naturally do, and it's still happening now wherever we go. And online, the gift of COVID was Zoom, so that we can meet over Zoom and form community that way.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah. Yeah, that sort of community building is incredibly, incredibly important too. And I definitely relate to that as well. I mean, I think it's just finding your people and just reaching for your people and, I think can be extremely important. And it's so great that I got to meet you. Yeah. Okay, so what else do I want to ask? So I was wondering if there's anything surprising, interesting, any secrets behind writing this book that you haven't shared in previous interviews or other readings.
Oh boy. Well,
Something new for
I I have a secret hope that because the Zora Neale Hurston poem is about a little bit about Alice Walker finding her grave. And I pray one day Alice Walker will be like, listen, that's not what happened. And you, how dare you write about that? I want to hear from Alice Walker on that poem. But you know what? Thank you so much, Alice Walker, because she did discover Zora Neale Hurston's grave. She did have it cleaned out. And I go there probably every year. And I pray to Zora to please help me. And lots of people are going there and they leave wine bottles and flowers. And she has a plaque now. I mean, when I say it's almost a nothing cemetery, it's maybe an acre in the middle of a like suburban neighborhood. You know, my son and I are wandering around with the GPS coordinates, being like, where on earth is this? There's a house there, you know, normal house. And you go a few feet this way, there's the cemetery. You're like, oh my gosh. But yeah, I would love to hear about Alice Walker complaining about that poem. I want to hear from Angela Davis too. She'd be like, girl, I don't remember you, but thanks for writing about me though. You still got my hair.
Well, I guess, okay, so maybe another question. What is it like writing poems to or about living, not everybody is living in this book, obviously, but to folks that are still alive. So what is that process or that experience like? I struggle with this myself when I'm writing a poem to somebody, like I know they're there, they exist, or I know I'm writing a poem about somebody, they might read it. How do you tackle that?
Um, well, I asked, well, there's the Edgar poems. I show them to him because we're close. I would say we're close and we're good friends. And I said, Edgar, do I have your permission to put these poems in here like this? Because one of them is talking about, how, very fabulous he is. And maybe he's private and he doesn't want people to read that. So he said, no, these look great. Thank you so much. I'm very honored. Um, like the Alice Walker one though, it's because that particular poem, I'm taking on Zora as the character, and
Mm,
we don't know exactly if that's her grave,
mhm,
and if she's there. And in the poem, she's like, well, she says Alice Walker wasn't running from snakes and she didn't fall into a hole. So I am saying she made that up, which probably she didn't, but I was just taking my poetic license, right? So I am a little cringing, like Alice Walker is gonna come for me, but I would enjoy Alice Walker coming for me because she would know I was alive. And when I met Angela Davis, I mean, some people are just beyond normal people. I
mm,
mean, she was everything that I wrote about. She was so tall. And if you hear her talk, you must go out and find her on YouTube and listen to her talk. The way she speaks is very distinctive. It's incredible. And like, I'm just like, I parked illegally so she wouldn't have to walk too far, to get in my car. And I was just completely mesmerized by her. Um, so I I had a hard time writing that poem, probably because I was so enamored with her. So at first I started to write it in a she was in my car and I said this and I said that. But that didn't really work, you know? So I talked about our aspirations through her because she's still alive and she's still doing this work, this incredible work. She's going out and talking and she's still an activist, very active out there. And you know what? If I still can't figure out how she got out of prison. I think she got out of prison with her own will. I
mm,
mean, the president of the United States, Richard Nixon, wanted to keep her in prison and she got out,
mm,
you know. So that incredible energy and I wanted to write about that. It was tough. So it took me a few years to get that poem together. Um, to figure out how to honor her and still have it be a good poem.
Hmm. That's wonderful. I love that. I love it. Love it. Love it. Okay. Yeah. So I was wondering before I ask any more questions, does anyone in the audience have any questions, or if anyone is, the Q&A, if anybody has any questions, they can pop in at any point. Okay, so I have a question about the actual way the collection came together, because I'm always wondering about how folks order the poems and kind of put them all together, and so I was wondering how this collection came together for you.
You know, a part of this collection seemed to write itself, honestly, because I remember having about 60 poems. I don't remember how the rest of them got in there. Suddenly they were there.
Yeah.
Where did I write these? I don't. Oh, yeah, I wrote this. I don't quite remember where all of these came from. And I think one of the most important classes I had was basically how to order the poems in a collection, how to connect different themes together, how to think about sections. And I wrote the poems about my mother first. The last part of the book's elegy to my mother, which I didn't really touch on. But I wrote that first. So that was like a solid, group of poems. And then um the first section is about being Black. And then that came together. And the rest of them are about like people that I know. One of my favorite ones is, I'm gonna say she's my favorite Cuban. I don't even know if she's still alive. I used to work with this woman called Susanna, and everybody hated Susanna because Susanna, listen, we worked at a jewelry counter, expensive jewelry counter in Aventura, Florida, and she's like, listen, every customer is mine. They are mine. I will come up, step on your feet, and take them from you. But she was just such a beautiful, elegant older woman. I just fell in love with her, even though she was awful, personality wise. And because I was kind to her and nice to her, she became nice and kind to me as well. Um, so there's poems about people that I meet, that I'm fascinated with. Um, and I was writing all these poems individually, and then I thought there was a contest for poets debuting over 50, and they have page counts. I think it was like 68 pages or something. And I'm like, oh, let me throw these poems together. Let me see, So I set it off. I really wasn't expecting anything. And then I was a semifinalist, and I knew like one whole section shouldn't have been in that collection because it was more like about romantic relationships and things like that, which didn't fit with the overall theme. So I said, okay, let's get writing and, put a proper collection together and see what happens. And, I really wasn't considered a poet in graduate school. Um, the proper poets looked down on me a little bit. Because I was writing a memoir, but I was fascinated with poetry, and I was like scuttling around the edges, talking to all the poetry professors, getting them to look at my terrible poems and, give me their opinions and whatnot. I was just very passionate about it. And I was very fortunate in that the collection was picked up fairly quickly, which I was shocked, because I was laboring with this memoir. I'm like, I have a memoir, y'all, that I went. This is what I did in graduate school.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I really feel helped the collection a lot is because of how it was ordered, because I had that whole class that helped me to do that. So I felt very comfortable, like sort of creating a tapestry and a path through for readers so that they would get a little Easter egg here talking about this. And then the little Easter egg would be like 3 poems later, and then maybe the title for The beginning of the next section had a little bit of something that, so I knew how to make a thread line to pull through. I think that had a lot to do, and I really enjoy that now. I love to sprinkle, different connections to poems throughout the piece. And the one thing you don't get when you read individual poems, you don't get that, because you need to read the whole thing. And I love, 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 love when a poet takes the title and it's like deep in the collection. Mine comes up pretty early, but like you forget about it, just reading your and then you're on page 68. There it is. There's the title, and I love that. I go, yay! So, I think poetry is like novels in that the way that they're laid out is really important and can really lend to the reader's experience.
Absolutely. So that's wonderful. So City Lights actually asks if Zora Neale Hurston had a spiritual dimension to her life. What is the role of spirituality in your practice? Oh, this is a great question because I think that definitely comes up in the collection. Or maybe it
Oh
doesn't.
boy, yeah. I do think I am a spiritual person, and when I was studying, I still study Kabbalah, and they had a lot of concepts in there, and I'm like, give me a break with that. Come on now. And I remember they would talk about angels, and I thought, oh, angel people, those are those women with the little figurines of angels everywhere. You're like, come on. And one time I went to my car and I was getting something out of the glove box, and I had this little leaf in there that was shaped like a heart that I thought was interesting. I put in the glove box. So I opened the glove box, and this leaf flew out of the glove box and it fell into the cup holder of my car where I'd left my debit card. And the way it flew, it wasn't like a normal, there was no air. It looked like somebody took it, they threw it there, and I'm like, look, dummy, you left your debit card in your open car. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, oh, okay, I maybe I believe now. I've that's some evidence. That's some serious evidence.
Yeah.
But my spirituality also claims, ancestors as well, and you could call on them. And really, honestly, when everything's going wrong, I just don't feel like I can continue on. I don't have the strength. And I says, listen, ancestors, wherever you are, whoever you are, y'all need to come in now. Like my mother's passed. She's been gone for 18 years. And I said, Mom, you were the strongest person I know. You need to come in here and do this. You need to come in here and help me because I don't have anything. I'm flat. I've got nothing. You need to come in here. And I do believe in a higher power. I believe in angels. I believe in connections. I don't quite understand how it all works. But and okay, I'm gonna give a secret, Jen,
Okay.
which So I take walks, and I was walking, and I felt I got a message on the walk, and it was very, very specific. It was like, listen, you are gonna get an offer for your collection. You're going to get 2 offers. The first offer, you have to wait 48 hours before accepting this offer. And the second offer will be better. And I'm thinking, girl, you're crazy. You just gone crazy. Completely insane. I'm thinking, oh no, I need to schedule an appointment for a mental health check because we've gone into cuckoo land now. And I was worried, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is nuts. First of all, this collection I had a 5-year plan. And then after I figured something out. So I think I got I got an offer for the collection probably 3 months after sending it out.
Mm.
And I remembered how I was like, okay, I have to wait 48 hours. Wait, and I don't want to because I'm just like, I want to take it. Waited 48 hours. I waited 48 hours. Okay, waited 48 hours. I accepted. And I'm like, I don't understand what you're saying because I accepted. We're going to sign the contract and this and that, blah, blah, blah. But the first people were taking forever with the contract. I said, okay, no problem. I'm waiting. I'll wait. No. As I'm waiting for that contract, a second offer comes in
Mm.
and it's a prize from University Press in Kentucky. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. There's no way. And I was, at first they didn't tell me it was a prize. They said, oh, we'd like to publish you. No mention of prizes. So I said, okay, well, can you publish me faster than these other ones, and maybe cough um, the contract quickly. And then they're like, oh, by the way, it's a prize. I'm like, what? So my mind's still blown over that. I'm blasé about it. Like, so I think that allowing yourself to be open and not rigid about things, because I love a plan and I'm a very rigid person. When my plan starts to go offline, I get very annoyed. But I feel like I'm at my best when I let all of that go.
Right.
And then you're open to what will happen, um, what the universe is telling you need to do.
Right.
And there's magic in that. So I feel like this collection was meant to be in a way because of how it came together on the side. And I didn't have too many classes where I was writing and just writing in between everything, and the way it came out and the way it's resonated with people has really surprised me because I'm hearing like there's a universality about it in terms of experience. But I felt it was very uniquely my experience, and I didn't know how my experience was going to relate to other people. But it seems really to relate to a lot of other people, which I'm really grateful for. So I've exposed my secret, and I'm a little bit nutso, which I will embrace. But the little angels were correct. That's what I have to say about that.
I love that. I love that you listen to them too. Like I wish I had a voice like that to listen to, but it's wonderful that because we have these internal voices that kind of push against that sometimes, that are just like, wait 2 days. I feel like my internal voice would be like, no, I would just accept it on the spot. But you listened and you were just like, okay, 2 days. Then
It was such a bizarre, the fact that the offer came in, I was in shock.
yeah.
I'm like, I better listen or something bad might happen.
Yeah, it's an amazing sensitivity to spirituality. I think it's just incredible. So one last thing, I wanted to ask a little bit about the cover of the book, which a little birdie told me you might have done yourself.
Yeah. So I'll hold it up because you with that blur.
Oh yeah, it's a blur. Sorry, this is actually the paperback is the one that I write in, the hardback's the one I read.
Um, so when I did the cover, I actually did a version of this painting before I was any kind of writer. And I was in my women's studies class, and they talked about um, a statue of Kolalikwe, who is, I'm not sure exactly, she is a goddess, but I'm not sure exactly which people she belongs to. And she's a double snake head goddess. So they dug the statue up. It says two snakes for heads. And whoever European dug it up was so horrified by the sight of this statue that they buried it again. They were like, no, 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 the world's not ready for this. I was just fascinated by that because when I was looking at it, it was just calling all types of messages. And you say you get chills. I got chills. And I thought, I want to make something like that that's so ugly to certain people, but to the right people, it'll call to them. So I did some research, and in the collection, there's I think it's Open Your Mouth, the poem. It talks about Jaguar Woman. And here's Jaguar Woman, and she looks very frightening. And she has this jaguar cloak, and the way she looks is directly referenced from different pre-Columbian art that I did the research on. And I wanted her to look frightening, but to her people, she would be inviting, and she was like a good spirit. And the skeleton, is just a representation of ancestors. And then on here, there's the ancestors here. There's my mother, there's my grandmother from Colombia, people from Spain, people from Africa. And I did the hair for the rest of it because our hair is such a point of contention, whether it's good or it's not good, or it's silky or it's not silky, you know. And I just felt like all these elements came together basically to make a mestiza and then a black mestiza. And for me, the whole book is about opening my mouth, open your mouth so that you can speak for your people, you speak for your ancestors, but also you have to be open. Yeah, I wish I could remember the name of the artist. She's a Mexican American artist, and I think her first name is Rosa, and she did a very similar picture where she had herself as the expression on the face. The expression on the face is passive, so it's like ready to receive. And she had a very similar look in her painting, but the eyes were really hard to do because the eyes had to be paying attention, but they also had to be relaxed. So I was having a fit over these eyes, and I had to really, really look at her painting to understand how to do this expression. So the painting is called Open Your Mouth as well. That goes along with the poem. And to me, this painting is what all of my work is about. It's about, bringing the ancestors to bear, being open enough to receive those messages, and being part of a spiritual practice that all kinds of people do, where they don't forget the people that came before, and they pass them along to their children.
These answers are amazing. So
Oh, thanks.
they really are. I'm just blown away. It's just wonderful. So Peter, hey.
We have come to the top of the hour, and I really want to thank you both for gracing our virtual halls. It has been such a pleasure to have you both with us. Yael Valencia Aldana, congratulations on this exquisite collection. Very compelling indeed. And Jennifer Maritza McCauley, thank you for doing the honors. So much gratitude to you both. Tonight's program has been made possible by support from the City Lights Foundation, fostering an active engagement with books and literary culture through our public events, our community and educational outreach, and our publishing program. And of course, all of it is dedicated to sustaining a vibrant community of readers, writers, and independent thinkers. So thank you all again. Goodbye. Take care. Stay strong. And we hope to see you all again soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. But thank you again. This is really a wonderful experience.
Right, thank you.
And I'm
Really
so
appreciate it.
grateful.